one time at my Unity church, we were practicing how to be public speakers, and something happens when that light comes on. This person takes over my body, and
There you go.
there, that's better. And this person takes over my body, and I don't know what it is. I just get all this energy. I guess it's from you all or something. I don't know. But anyway, my name is Bethel Barnes, actually, and I am the president of the Unity Board here at Unity Namaste, and I'm here to welcome you all. So I hope you feel welcome, because that's my job. And if you don't feel welcome, I'm not doing my job. But I did want to tell you a little bit about Unity Namaste. It is an official Unity ministry, and it has a U.S. tax-exempt organization. So if you want to give your money, that you get to take it off your taxes if you're still paying it in the United States. Our services take place through the cooperation and generosity of James Twyman, who I just saw walk by a little bit ago, but I don't see him now. Anyway, James is the founder and the head of Namaste Village here in Ajijic, Mexico. And we want to welcome you, one and all, whether you're here or whether you're joining us on the Google Meet. And we really, really are happy you're here. And I'm not kidding when I say that. We really are happy you're here. So we want to welcome you. And we also want to begin with an opening prayer, because in Unity, we don't do anything. You know, you wake up in the morning and say, I can say my prayer, and then you go to the bathroom, you got to say your prayer, then you come out, and you got to say your prayer. So we're kind of into praying around here. So if y'all don't mind, please close your eyes and take a nice deep breath. And as we let out all our air, we also let out all our feelings of frustration, uneasiness, anger, maybe somebody pulled in front of you when you were driving here and you didn't like it. Just let that go. Let it all go. And as we breathe in slowly and let out all of our anxieties, let's also remember that we are the child of God. We are the Son of God. We are what God created. And we share that love and peace and joy. And as we look at our fellow man, we see that in them too. And we wish them love and peace and joy. And we know that we are always blessed. And we say, thank you, God, for this wonderful blessing, for this wonderful day, and for this life that we have. Amen.
Amen.
Now, some of you might be wondering where Reverend Johannes is, because normally she's up here and gets us started. Well, she's winging her way to the U.S. to be ordained as a deacon. And that's a part of the process that she's going through to become an Anglican priest. Once she is a priest, she's going to do Anglican services in Spanish at St. Andrew's Anglican Church right here. But that won't interfere with her being here. She'll still be here, so don't worry about that. But let's keep her in our prayers because, she's on the plane. So I do want to talk to you, though, about our wonderful September members. September ministers. There, I got it. Well, you're members, too. You're automatically members and ministers. So we have two this month. Reverend Karen Eaps was ordained in 2005. She holds a master's degree in integral theory and is an SQ21 certified coach. Now, I forgot to ask her, what the heck is an SQ21 certified coach? Maybe she'll tell us. I don't know. Anyway, if she doesn't, we'll have to catch her after service and find out. What the heck is an SQ21 certified coach? But her background includes visioning, spiritual leadership, retreat ministry, and prior to her retirement in 2020, Reverend Karen served ministries at Miami, Dallas, and Pasadena. She's a well-traveled girl. And we also have Reverend Bill Englehart. He is an author and former minister at Unity Center in Northern California. He was there for 13 years, so he must not have done too bad because they kept him around for 13 years. But we're lucky to have him here today. Reverend Bill has written many Unity publications. The Unity Magazine, he's written in Contact Magazine, he's written in Daily Word articles. So we are just really blessed to have him here too. He also served on the board of trustees of Unity World Headquarters for 8 years. So he's a big muckety muck.
Yeah, he's the man.
Yeah, you got to brush up against him. And he's also a wonderful person. So what we're going to do now, we're going to welcome anyone who's here for the very first time. Is anyone here for the very first time? Is this your first time? Oh, goody. Would you all stand up, please? And we have a special way of welcoming you. And all of us, I want you to repeat after me, okay? And here's what we're going to say to them. We know who you are.
We know who you are.
You are a unique expression of the divine.
You are a unique expression of the divine.
We love you.
We love you.
We bless you.
We bless you.
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
We behold the Christ as you.
We behold the Christ as you.
And we see you doing even greater things.
And we see you doing even greater things.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And now I'm going to ask Karen, Reverend Karen, to come up and do our daily work and our meditation.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Reverend Karen Epps here. Today's daily word, remembrance. The affirmation, you live in my heart. Whether they have passed on recently or many years ago, the people for whom I have cared deeply are alive in my heart. If I feel sad or lonely for those I miss, I pause to recall a special memory or something unique about them that made even ordinary days feel magical. Reflecting on the love and joy we shared and the blessings their lives afforded me, I feel comforted. I am thankful that these memories will always be mine to treasure. I know that life does not end with death. Life is eternal, and my loved ones will always be beautiful, beloved expressions of spirit. I am grateful those who have passed from this life experience continue to live in spirit and are forever in my heart. The scripture comes from Psalms 112, verse 6. For the righteous will never be moved. They will be remembered forever. And the word for the day is remembrance, the affirmation, you live in my heart. And let us take those words within this morning as we do come together for a time of meditation. You live in my heart. And as we breathe into that truth, the you is the divine spirit that animates us all. It is the essence of being. The you are those that are special to us, that we do remember in this time, whether they have passed on or not. We bring them fully present into our heart space as we expand and embrace the wholeness of being. The you is also each and every one of us, the I of the I am that lives within me. And for those who have passed on, we do have this moment of remembrance, of being able to call forth a special memory, a place in our hearts that reminds us of the beauty of that relationship. Just feel into your own breath, your own being, your own heart. And know that you are remembered. That there is only love, there is only life. And that in this awareness of love and life, we experience ourselves and each other fully. We give thanks, sweet Spirit, knowing that we are one. That we are one in you, and the wholeness of being is with us right here, right now. And we affirm, you live in my heart. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Anybody ever watch Peanuts? Charlie Brown?
Yeah.
It's one of those lines that came out of that always stuck with me was Lucy telling something to Charlie Brown. Good grief, Charlie Brown. That always stuck with me. And I'm like, good grief? And what is that? And it's an exclamation about irritation, about frustration, about surprise. Well, I'm going to be talking about good grief. Can grief be good? Can grief be good? I'm going to be talking about our grief, how we experience it and can experience it. I'm going to be talking about the grief that we can experience with others when someone else is going through a time of grief, about us showing up for them and how can we do that. I'm going to explore this idea that there is such a thing as good grief. It's one of those topics that people don't talk about. It used to be religion, politics, and sex. You don't talk about one or any of those. Now all that's off the table. But the one thing that's left was one thing that wasn't even mentioned in that because it was just so beneath the surface, was the idea of talking about grief. Grief is a fact of life. Right? It's a fact of life. But a fact of life we were never prepared for. Grief, as this whole topic, is something we tend to avoid. And over many years of talking to people about grief, people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to experience it. They're like, well, if I don't talk about it, then I won't have that feeling. Or if someone else is grieving, I don't want to bring it up because it's going to upset them, right? And so it just goes under the surface. But it is there and it's alive for each and every one of us in this life experience. And it's about time we spend some time going into and discovering what grief is and how we deal with grief and how we experience grief and how we push through grief. And when we talk about grief, oftentimes people go right to the idea that grief and death, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's true. There is much grief that goes on when we're dying or someone else, but it's not just about that. We experience grief throughout our entire lives. There's all kinds of things that come into our lives and go out of our lives. Have you ever lost a job? Just me? Have you ever lost a job? Have you ever had a friendship evaporate that you did not expect? Did you ever have a relationship end that you thought was going great? And all of a sudden, then it was all over. Did we grieve that? I know people that spent many years in prison and lost their freedom. Let me tell you, there's a lot of grief that goes on with that. What about a child going to school? Your child going to school for the first day, or going to college and leaving the house. There's grief there as well. If you've ever moved, you might have loved your old house, or loved your old garden, or loved the old neighbors, and now you've moved to a different town and they're no longer there. There's grief that goes along with that. Retirement can bring about its own grief as well. Infertility could bring about grief. No longer physically being able to drive anymore, or losing some physical ability. Used to run, but now I was a runner. I've always been a runner. I'm still a runner, but I used to be, I ran 10-minute miles. I could set my watch to it. No longer. There was grief that came up with that. What's the date today?
September 11th.
September 11th. Anybody feel any grief still about that? Oh my goodness, of course. When that happened, you felt the entire country go into a stage of grief. You felt the world reach out to try to support us back then. That's one of those things we often forget, how many countries reached out to support us. A few days ago, the Queen of England made her transition. I lived in England for a couple of years. I never met the Queen, but what a wonderful woman she was, and she was so highly respected among the people of the United Kingdom and of the world. So even though I never met her, when she made her transition, I still have feelings. I had some grief come up for her and for us, for the world, saying, well, this is one of those world leaders that's you like to have around that would speak the truth to power. Something we don't often want to recognize is that everyone and everything that comes into our lives will eventually leave. Think about it. Think about every person. We were in high school. I had 300 friends in high school. And then one day, whew, everybody's off to a different college or doing some job or something. All of a sudden, the next day, they were all gone. And then you go to college, and then boom, you graduate, and then they're all gone. And then you go off to a job, and then you're working with those people. I mean, for me, I worked with jobs where I spent more time with those people at work than I did with my family. We're waking hours, and then the company may close down, or someone may get laid off. All these things, people are coming and going. They're waves that come. People come and go in our lives. Jobs come and go in our lives. Everything comes to pass. Do we appreciate it when we're in the presence of it, in the presence of those people, in those situations, in those circumstances? Because one day it's going to be gone. And when it is, how do we step into that? Now, that's one thing. After teaching classes and workshops over the years on this topic, no one's really been taught about grief. When we grow up, we're not taught about how to grieve. All we do is kind of see what maybe our parents do when someone dies, or there's somebody who loses a job or something, and we just kind of get socialized into behaviors that are not congruent with health. Things like, well, we'll just deny it. We'll just don't cry anymore. It's already been a week, or it's been a year. Like, all of a sudden, at some point, we're going to forget we love those people, or forget those relationships that we had. We've never been taught about what a gigantic role grief will play in our lives, and the certain inevitability of grief in our lives. And when you think about that, I think about it and say, why wasn't there a class on that? Why wasn't there taught in school? Why didn't my parents sit down and say, listen, everything comes and goes, appreciate it where it is, love it where it is, and then here's what happens, and here's how you grieve, and to work through that. But we are totally not prepared. But when we know how everything comes and goes, we get perspective. And we start to recognize the importance of grief in our lives, because it's not something that's avoidable, even though we may want to deny it. It's an integral part of our lives. And so how do we step into that? How do we embrace that? The Dalai Lama said it like this. He said, death is unpredictable. If I wish to die well, we must learn how to live well. Hoping for a peaceful death, we must cultivate peace in our mind and in our way of life. And in our life means dealing with the griefs, the deaths that come and go. Even when a friendship breaks up, it can feel like a death, can't it? Your best friend moves when you're a kid, or your best friend moves when you're an adult. There's all kinds of grief feelings that come up, but we need to be able to step into those. When I think of my own personal grief, there's 2 times I retired. One time I retired from the corporate world. And when I did that at age 40, I then did some black and white photography. Got into my artistic areas. And I had art shown and photography in London, as well as in the United States. But when people would come up to me, they would introduce themselves. They'd say, Bill, what do you do? And the first thing I would say is, well, I used to be an international human resources director for a Fortune 50 company, but now I'm a photographer. And I'm like, why did I just say that? Because I was still attached to that old role, that old title, the old idea of, being taken around in limousines and taken in business meetings and traveling all over the world. And I had told myself, working in human resources, never get too attached to the job. Because one thing you learn in human resources, jobs can come and go, layoffs happen, never get too attached. Even knowing that, I found that I had been. And so what I realized was it took probably a year and a half for me to just say, well, I do black and white photography now, without going back to saying what I used to do, because I sat with myself and asked myself the question, why am I still saying it? And it was because I had not grieved the loss. Even though it was my idea to step out of that career, I still had grief about it. So I had to be with it, process it, feel it, and then be able to move to the next stage. Then I was in the ministry for 15 years, and I recently retired from that. Well, that was 4 years ago already. It was 4 years ago from platform ministry. And when I was up in Marin, it was great. I loved it. It had a large congregation. I couldn't go to the store without somebody recognizing me. Karen and I'd be talking in a bookstore, and somebody come around the corner and say, I recognize your voice from the podcast. I'd be like, wow, I'm famous within 5 miles of the church. But even though it was my idea to say, it's time to retire and to walk away from that, and it was wonderful. But then I moved out to Pasadena. I moved in with Karen, and she was senior minister at Unity of Pasadena, and I intentionally took the job as the handyman.
Yes.
I'd fix all kinds of stuff around the church, but I got to admit, there were times I'd walk around Pasadena, nobody knew who I was. So I had to have some grief about that and say, well, I guess I was kind of attached to that. I needed to spend time with them. I need to know that I'm more than that last job title. I'm more than the title I had in the corporate world. I'm more than the title of the senior minister. What kind of personas had I put on that I've attached myself to? I had to grieve that. That's no longer what I was doing. So what am I going to do, and who am I going to be now? You see, how we grieve smaller losses in our lives sets up a pattern of behavior. Now, if you lost a dog when you were a kid, I bet you cried immediately, right? I mean, I would have. Oh, my goodness. But if you lost something else, you lost your keys, you lost the book, you got lost somewhere, all these things can bring up grief. How have we dealt with that? Have we dealt with it? Have we gone to that place of denial, anger, or sadness? Have we really sat with it and said, that pen I got from my favorite teacher in grade school and I lost it? And most people wouldn't understand how sad I feel. But that's the grief. I need to feel that. Instead of just saying, yeah, it was just a pen and pretending it didn't feel anything and I'll just go on with my life. Think about anything you may have lost. Any friend that may have moved, or a job that you may have taken. Or like I said, you move from a house and your neighbors that you used to rely on, and they're not there anymore. Have we taken the time to really sit with that, to be with it, to feel the sense of loss, to feel the sense of sadness, to let it flow through us? Let it flow through us. Are we in a state of avoidance where I'm just not going to think about it, I'm going to deny it? Or are we going to really be honest with how we're feeling when it happens? Sure, I'm not the only person that has gotten broken up with or broken up in a relationship. And if somebody breaks up with you, do we really take the time to say, who am I? Can I really assess that relationship? Can I look at what worked and what didn't work? What do I want in the next relationship? Do we go through that kind of the grief of the loss and the analysis of what happened? Or do we just jump into another relationship? Anybody done that? Just run to it. I don't have to look back. I don't have to feel about that. I'll just go get another relationship and that'll fix it. And unfortunately, that's the problem. And now you just drew another person into your problem by getting into another relationship because we didn't spend the time going and feeling through the grief. People have asked me over the years, when is a good time to grieve? And I'm like, exactly the moment you feel it. To not put it off. I'll give you an example. You're in the supermarket. Somebody's in front of you, and you smell the perfume. And it happened to be the same perfume of your favorite aunt who had died 3 months ago. And you start getting choked up. And here's the mental thing that goes on for most of us. I can't cry in the supermarket. I can't show my emotions out here. I'll wait till I get home. And then we get home and we don't. The best thing to do is when you're in the supermarket and you get that feeling, cry. Just start bawling in the supermarket. And people may ask you, what's up? And you can tell them, well, I'm grieving the loss of my aunt. And you know what that's going to do? That's going to start to set up a socialization that, if this lady I didn't know started crying about her aunt in the supermarket, when I feel grief, I'm going to be able to express it too. You're going to be able to start setting an example because the more we put it off, it does not go away. I'm going to give you a truth from the book of Bill. And the book of Bill says that grief is cumulative. Whatever we do not fully grieve does not go away. It stays there. It's like shaking up a Coke can inside of our body. There's that energy that's just there and there and there, and it's going to be there, and it's going to build and build and build, and it's going to turn into that unexpressed grief into anger, illness, depression, or all three. So letting grief out, the small griefs, that sets us up so that when we have the big griefs, we know what to do and we have the experience. But if we refuse to look at it, we stay in a state of denial, I guarantee it's going to be anger, illness, or depression that's going to come through. And we're going to feel that a lot worse. And on the flip side of that, when something finally breaks through and we do start to grieve, and for me, there's been plenty of times where I've tried to push it away, but I'm a dog lover. And when I've had dogs make their transition, there is no putting it off. There's no putting off my grief. There's no putting off the tears. It just comes out. And you know what comes out with it? Everything else that I had not grieved up to that point in time. And so it's a blessing when we allow ourselves that opportunity to let it out, to cry. And some people have told me, Bill, if I start crying, I'll never stop. I'm like, you will.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, the time will come. You will. You may cry yourself to sleep, wake up, cry again, go to sleep. But that's all letting this energy flow through you instead of trying to hold it in. Of course, there's always the questions I get about death and grief. What do I say? What don't I say? And I tell you, if you get this right, you're not only going to help someone who's sick or dying, you are going to be able to help yourself. I was with a woman who was dying of cancer many years ago, and her daughter were estranged. And I called the daughter. She called the daughter several times because time was ticking away and she was going to make her transition. And the daughter didn't respond. But finally, a week before her mom died, she showed up. In that moment, that woman was healed, not cured. And I guarantee you, healing was more important than the cure. She went through her transition with a smile on her face because the healing happened. Healing is always possible. Now, when you're with someone who's sick or dying, how's this for a concept? Let them talk. Oftentimes people won't even go to someone who's dying because they're afraid. I don't know what to say. So then they just don't show up. And so you don't have to say anything. Just go there. Just be there. Just listen. Maybe ask them what it is that they want. As a minister, I know Karen and I have been to plenty of bedsides, and people are dying. And I ask, will you pray with me? And I'll say, what do you want to pray for? Because I'm not going to assume that they want to pray to get better. Oftentimes they say, I want to pray for my family that is leaving behind. Okay, we do that. Then I go out into the hall and I ask the family, what do you want to pray for? We want to pray for grandma to get better, right? And I'm like, you're not talking to each other. You know, there's people outside, they're in denial. They won't even admit grandma's dying. She's in there dying. She knows she's dying, okay? Have a conversation with her. And I'll go into more about that in the workshop about step-by-step what to do and how to be with people who are going through grief, and that'll be tomorrow. But how many of you are familiar with the 5 stages of grief? And we've all, had a little bit of that, and we try to dig that out sometimes, but all of a sudden, where am I? It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And that's not just for dying. That's the same things that we go through when you lose the job, or your house gets, repossessed, or your car, or you lose something. All of those steps are just as viable. Because I don't, it's not happening. I'm upset it's happening. What if I do this, God? What if, if I do this, will you take this away from me? And then we get depressed. But finally, there is acceptance. And I want to say this about the 5 stages that I was never taught, is that it doesn't just go linear. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can bounce all around in those 5 stages of grief. But again, it's not only for the dying, but it's for the living. In fact, when it's Stephen Levine said this about grief that I think is just a wonderful quote. He said, our grief often manifests as self-judgment, as fear, as guilt or anger and blame. Our grief is our fear of loss, our fear of the unknown, our fear of death. Grief is the rope burns left behind when what we've held to most dearly is pulled out of reach, beyond our grasp. It often manifests as a feeling of separation from ourselves, from others, and from God. So how can we be present with those who are grieving? Someone who's lost someone. And so the first thing we need to do is show up, not to be afraid to be with them. Open the door to communication and say something like, how can I support you? Maybe someone just lost their son or their daughter or their husband. Be patient. Real support is never a quick fix. Listen, even if they tell you the same story you've heard 500 times about their ex or about their husband or their son or daughter, let them say it. Be available and anticipate what their needs are. and be there at the times that are the toughest. And what are the times that are the toughest? Holidays, anniversaries, their wedding anniversary, the death anniversary. I've called up so many people over the years on the day that their husband or wife died to just be there with them. And they're like, nobody calls on this day. They're so glad that to hear from someone because they haven't forgotten. Offer specific help. Don't say, well, call me if you need anything. You need to do is, look at the yard and say, I'm sending my son over there to mow the yard, or I'm going to bring you some groceries. Do something specific, not just general. They'll think you don't believe it. You don't really mean it. Don't give advice to the griever about telling them how it is for them. They have to have their own experience. Don't make judgments. Don't tell the mourner they're doing something they shouldn't unless they're doing something that's incredibly harmful. And above all, do not hurry them through grief. Don't hurry them through their grief by reminding them about how long it's been or what they should be doing. Grief works takes time, patience, and it is not on a schedule. Grief is not something that we get over. It's not something that we get through. It's a process of finding a place in our hearts over time to remember the love that we received and the love that we gave. That's what grief is. Remembering that. And the more we focus on our own feelings and experiences, we're able to remember all the good that maybe came out of that relationship before it ended, the job before it ended. Even when our best friend dies, instead of remembering them dying in the hospital, we start to remember all the good things, all the good times that we had with them. And you know what? People want to be remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. Now, normally when I end a talk, I would have a really upbeat song. But this topic is about grief. It's about feeling. And so there's a country song. Any country fans? Well, I am. So I picked a country song that's about living, loving, and loss, of which I think we can all relate to. And if you have some feelings come up around it, good. Let those feelings come up. And if tears come, let them come. This is part of the training about how to have good grief. And so let's go to that song.
It's a great blessing to be able to have our hearts opened, and to be able to feel and connect with that essential aspect of ourselves, that lets us be more present and more vulnerable, and more open. And so what a gift it is. So thank you, Reverend Bill, for your message this morning and engaging us in having the experience together of having this sacred space to be who we are and to be open. This is the time in our service where we share of our gifts and tithes and offerings. As Bethel shared at the opening of the service, Unity Namaste of Ajijic is a 501c3. It is a charitable organization, a church that operates here out of Namaste Village. And your contributions that you make today are in service and support of this ministry, Unity Namaste of Ajijic. And so I invite you, as you hold your offering in your hand, and our ushers will be coming forward to receive that from you, that as you hold that offering in your hand, that you dedicate it to this sacred work that is being done through this Unity ministry. You can also donate by credit card, by the way. If you are not having cash in your hand at the moment, you can donate by credit card through the unitynamaste.org website using PayPal. You do not have to have a PayPal account in order to do that. So note that as well, or the donate button on the website. And so let us hold their offering in our hand as we share in the blessing together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Joyfully I give, and gratefully I receive. And we are now going to be sharing in that process together here. And so once again, thank you everyone for your generous support, whether you're here in person or those of you who are joining us online. We are, as Bethel said at the beginning of the service, so glad that you are here. And as we prepare to close our service this morning, I'm going to invite Bethel to come back up and lead us in the prayer for protection. And then we'll close with the peace song. But since Johannes isn't here today, we're doing the gringo version of it, not the salsa one. Hang on.
All right. Are we
I
gonna-
think I already did.
You blessed it. Okay, then we're ready. All right. Do we have the words up here? There we are.
Prayer for protection.
So if we all would like to stand, we'll say the prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever you are, God is, and all is well. Thank you. And now we're going to sing our peace song. Well, we did pretty good considering. So it's time to say goodbye to everyone out in the computer land, TV land, wherever you are. We'll say goodbye and thank you so much, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye bye now.